What's the most ucked up thing you've seen at work? I was a head lifeguard instructor. The worst was probably a 15-year-old boy that dove of the diving board, cracked his head open on the bottom of the pool, blood gushing, and was unconscious. My coworker and I had to do a deep water spinal rescue, which is basically the hardest rescue at a pool. The kid not only survived, but became a fellow lifeguard himself the next summer. Smiley face. A guy knew he was getting fired, so he took a hit in the trash can in his cubicle. Nobody knew if headed it there or took it into the bathroom to hit in it, but he did it one way or another. He got called up to hour and was let go. Then the people working in his area started complaining about the hit smell, and, sure enough, I found it in his little trash can. Then I called him to ask about it, and he said it was an old burrito he forgot to throw out. It was not an old burrito he forgot to throw out. Deleted. The most ucked up thing I saw was my boss being stabbed by his wife. No one allowed in stairway, except during shift change. I caught them ucking in the stairway. Edit. I wrote the comment in a hurry and incomplete. I was the supervisor and caught a couple ucking in the stairway. I sent them home and filled out a report. The next day they were both fired. After they were fired, that's when they higher ups made and had the sign put up. Saw a guy fall 40 floors onto a large pile of cast iron piping as I was walking off for lunch. Didn't end up eating lunch after that. Guy cut his finger in the deli slicer and tried to keep cutting lunch meat for a customer with blood everywhere. Saw one guy drop dead, office job. One get an arm cut off, pulp mill. One get degloved, paper mill. But the winner was the day we walked into work at an auto parts store and found the SSI stamp manager ucking another assistant manager in the ass. Just going at it. Coworker ended up ODing and no one in his family told his dad. The only reason his dad found out his son died was because the dad called the company to see if his son still worked there. My boss had to be the one to tell him the bad news because no one in the guy's family was willing to tell him. I saw someone who had fallen into an industrial shredder and unfortunately went through. Two things. Pulled up to work. Dude runs out of the store and is immediately shot by a dude behind me. He was stealing and the other guy just shot him. I called out that day. I was the only guy on the front end and a dude had went into the bathroom like 50 minutes ago. So they send me to check, found him slumped over dead. He OD'd and died in our ucking bathroom. I went home after that. I used to work with special needs kids, ages 3 to 7, and one of them came up to me on a Monday morning and told me her dad died over the weekend, then skipped off to go play with the rest of the group. I learned later that day that he had overdosed on heroin, and I'm assuming she hadn't fully understood what being dead meant, and that she thought she might see him again. I saw a coworker get crushed to death under 6 tons of dirt. I helped dig his body out. A guy losing a finger because he tried moving an industrial strength fan without turning it over and his finger slipped through the grate. Opioid addiction patient would inject directly into open wounds in her biceps. And I'm not talking small wounds. Both her biceps were eaten away. There were little thready bits of tissue that were inconvenient because they would get caught on stuff, so she cut them. She was in her mid-20s but had started using as a teenager with her mom. She would get bloodstream infections and heart infections and leave before finishing treatment. Edit. Obligatory highest comment edit. Am a nurse. Used to work on an oncology unit. One of my patient's family members walked into the wrong room by accident. The patient in that room had passed away and was shrouded, waiting for transport to the morgue. She threw herself on the body, weeping, thinking it was her loved one, and no one had called her. Then we realized what happened. It was not good. Craned an old grain bin that was cemented into the concrete slab it was on. The bird hit, feathers and carcasses made a firm floor about 2 feet deep. Inside were about 15 pigeons who looked like they never seen the light of day, somewhere too ucked up to fly, or too young. One was pink, like bald, and absolutely the offspring of multi-generational incest. They were all ucked up. They couldn't get out because the only place to escape was the cap at the top, which is impossible for a bird to fly vertically through without messing up their flight on the roof sheets. I'm guessing they survived off of the grain left inside it, and cannibalizing the dead. Most farmers in my experience air out the bins and leave ways for birds to escape before we show up to work. But that was probably the nastiest farmyard I've been in. There were 7 other bins just like it in a row. Worked at a call center. I was in the break area on the 2nd floor and heard a guy getting into an argument with his soon-to-be ex-wife. I walked away and back into my call area, and about 30 seconds later the whole call center went into lockdown. Found out that the guy decided to kill himself and jump head first into the concrete floor and landed right in front of my coworker. He was granted unlimited paid days off and paid therapy for the rest of the year. Deleted. A guy at my old job got fired and asked if he could sit in my truck while he waited for a ride. I said because we were work friends. Well, his ride showed up and was waiting for him for like 15 minutes, so I went to my truck to see what he was doing. I opened the door to see him passed out with a needle in his arm. He came to and was very ashamed that he was shooting up in my truck. I honestly just felt bad for him. He was previously a recovering addict, but relapse got the better of him. I hope he's doing better now. Edit. Other than that, saw a guy blow himself up and watched his head fly over my helicopter. Both were pretty crazy, I guess. Guy get crushed and killed by machinery he was working on while on a scissor lift. Also saw some guys test the fire system by piling a bunch of trash on the floor of a loading area, dousing it with lighter fluid and igniting it. Turns out it worked. I worked at a company of about 28 people where partner number 1 died in our largest client's corporate jet crash. 10 months later, partner number 2 and president was caught by his wife canoodling an account executive, checked into a hotel with a pint of Rocky Road ice cream, a bottle of champagne, and a snub-nosed .38, and did the predictable thing. In truth, it was one of 4 different affairs in an office of 28 people. That meant more than one person in every 3 was banging one another. By the way, I wasn't one of them. Partner number 3 came out of 6 months of rehab to take over the helm of the shop. True to form for people who go through rehab, he thought everybody should go through a 12-step program. So he bust USALL up to a mountaintop in the middle of January to talk about our feelings and do trust exercises. After that, he started firing employees who had manned their posts while he was in rehab. I wasn't one of them, but I certainly didn't trust him with my career, all in a 2-year period. A guy cut his forearm open with a paint chip from the wall and then played with his tendons like they were guitar strings. Meanwhile, blood was spraying all over the cell. I'm a corrections officer. Worked with a guy at a retail store. He came in one day with one red eye and the other normal, so I asked if he was okay. He said yes and said his pet rabbit scratched him while he was playing with it. I didn't think anything of it until about 3 days later when he got arrested, charged with the murder of a pregnant woman and her fetus. He partly dismembered her body to try to hide his tracks, and when he realized that wouldn't work, he then burned her house down with her body inside. That's when I realized that those scratches were really from her fighting for her life. His name is Matthew Brush, and as far as I know, he's still in prison. What is your opinion on the Reddit blackout, and should AskReddit participate as one of the most active subs? Take it all down and leave the bots scrambling to post on 4chan or whatever other hitty social media place accepts them. I think after a week it will be forgotten and nothing will change from Reddit's side. 2 days won't have an impact. Leaving for months will have an impact. It's important to remember, we are not the customers. Advertisers are the customers and our time and attention is the product. The question is not how people feel about this, but whether they'll let Reddit know how they feel about this. We'll see. Never argue with an idiot. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. What's your best real-life example of this? Anytime I've tried to explain marginal tax rates to an employee. The day before Biden's inauguration, a coworker told me the military would execute him live on stage and Trump would walk out to be named as president again. When I laughed and said there's literally no chance of it, he said, "Dude, what do you know? You work in a warehouse in nowhere, you don't know hit," ignoring that he's my coworker in the same warehouse. I thought I had a no-lose argument going up against someone who believes in homeopathy. I left the discussion feeling like I lost somehow sad face. Where is one place you will never go to? The moon. Mount Everest. I understand why some people want to, but even if I had eternal life, I can't imagine wanting to spend any of it climbing a freezing cold mountain just to say I've been to the highest point on Earth. Somalia. Dubai. It just doesn't appeal to me at all. Burkina Faso. Not because I have anything against the place, it just seems like a really unlikely location for me to end up. It's fun to say, though. Back to my old high school. UCK, that place. The beyond part of Bed Bath and Beyond, sadly. No matter how hard I try. North Sentinel Island. That dark place beyond everything the light touches. Individuals who do drink. How are you able to limit yourself to just a couple and not result into 16 to 18-ish beers? Hey friend. So, you and I sound alike. It took me a long time to realize that what I thought was a normal thought, look at all that booze. I can drink as much as I want. Really wasn't what everyone else was thinking. I am not a normal drinker. I cannot have 1, 2, or 3. I am hard-coded to keep going. Not sure where that comes from, but I can confirm, after 30+ years off-field testing, that for me, it's true. So, I had the choice, ultimately, to keep going or stop. I stopped, eventually. I think you have discovered, much earlier than I did, that you see the world differently and others. That's a great thing to know. The Stop Drinking sub is filled with questions like this and others. You might find it useful. I hope you figure things out. Be well. Op. No one who has answered so far understands your question because they aren't alcoholics. They can have 1 or 2 drinks without having 18 because they aren't alcoholics. For alcoholics, the only real way not to have the 18th drinks is to not have the first drink. It's like being allergic to something. If it helps, if you don't drink at all but still go out at night sober with your friends, you effectively become Superman around midnight. Not kidding.